Yeah, I mean, it's like what we got going on today and around the world, Stuff happens, everyone gets freaked out and uptight.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like people realize on some deep level that we actually have no control over anything.
אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה.
Today, unusually, we're not going to teach from the Slonimer, but we're going to teach from the Sfat Emet, who's another great master of the end of the 19th century. He died in the early 20th century as the Rebbe of the Ger Hasidim, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter of Ger. And in typical fashion for Purim, we're going to do it all upside down. Usually you teach about a holiday before the holiday in preparation, but Purim was yesterday. So, Purim, everything is upside down, everything is inside out, and like reality itself. We just don't see it most of the time. But in Purim we're called to see it, that everything is really not what it seems. And anyway, so we'll jump into that today.
Purim is about recognizing God where God seems not to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what we got going on today and around the world, Stuff happens, everyone gets freaked out and uptight.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like people realize on some deep level that we actually have no control over anything. Mm-hmm. And it seems that we're at the mercy of the forces of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of what was happening in Persia,
mm-hmm.
Iran.
Mm-hmm.
In Persia, this story, things were getting out of control. The government,
mm-hmm.
political things were happening that were, going against the Jewish people, and all kinds of crazy stuff was happening. Jewish girl gets kidnapped, becomes the queen, but can't tell anyone she's Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, a guy that was a bum
mm-hmm.
gets becomes the prime minister, and all kinds of. It seems like what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do? So they did a few things.
Right.
They gathered together.
Mm-hmm.
They all got together.
They fasted.
And they prayed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found a brave person, Esther, who was brave enough to... The coolest part is that God's name is not even mentioned in there.
Yeah.
There's 10 chapters. It takes about 35, 40 minutes for the guy to read it, but there's and God has a lot of different names, ways that we express the divine through different, like Jewish Hebrew name. None of them are in there, none. And the rabbis say an interesting thing. They say, yeah, you're right, that's the point. But you have to look closely. You see, it says the word king in there a lot. Mm-hmm. It does say the word king. When it says the king, it's really talking about God there.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is hidden. Everything is hidden in the story of Purim. It's all hidden. Okay, so the whole story of Purim is to try to peel back the mask, which is one of the reasons why kids get dressed up, and some adults get dressed up in costumes on.
There's a miracle hidden in there, and the miracle is in the pur. The word pur means lottery. So there's a randomness. And the question is randomness really random? When you throw the dice, do the dice just randomly, come out or not, and that gets into very deep spiritual philosophical understanding of exactly what you said. There's the order, the higher order, and how that's hidden from us. If you like what you hear here, hello everybody out in cyber world, cyberspace. If you like what you hear here, please like it and subscribe. Why not? We're here to give you spirituality and Torah, and we would love your attention. Ita Bagmara, it says in the Talmud, it says in the Gemara, Mechayev inish l'psume v'furia ad delo yada ben Baruch Mordekhai ve'aru Haman. It says a person needs to drink so much on Purim until you cannot tell the difference between the blessed Mordechai and the cursed Haman. Right, that's what we're supposed to do. So knock yourself out so much. You got to get so unconscious that you can't tell good from bad. That's Purim. Shamati b'zeh milin mipi kadosh mori zkeni. So I heard these words from the mouth of my holy teacher and grandfather. May his or father, may his memory be a blessing. La'alot ad lemala me'etz hadat tov v'ra. To rise up until you reach above the tree of knowledge, good and evil. So if we remember the tree of knowledge, good and evil, that was the tree in the Garden of Eden. And once Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, so they lose their innocence, right? They lose their heavenly innocence and they become introduced to good and evil. And we live in a reality that's dualistic like that. There's the good, there's the evil. I mean, ask Hollywood, any movie has the protagonists and the good ones and the bad ones. That you rise above that tree. You rise above the level where there's a distinction between good and evil. To wrap my mind around the spiritual concept that there is a reality where, by the way, on the same level, time doesn't exist, space doesn't exist, right? And then also the moral dichotomy of good and evil does also not exist. What that means exactly, I don't know that I need to explain. I'm trying to understand myself, right? But that we need to explain that per se. But just to know, I guess just a recognition that there is a space, there is a reality that works, operates under different rules than this reality. And it's what we call the higher realms. And the Rebbe says here, so there's a way that when you get so drunk on Purim, this is a way of going to a place that's beyond ordinary consciousness, right? And he says, you go to that place, you've gone beyond the paradigm of the tree of good and evil. So, thank you for the question, because it helps clarify and deepen a little bit. ואיני זוכר הדברים על בריאן, אבל נראה טורף הדברים כדכתיב. But it seems to me that this comment relates to a verse in the story of Purim, in the Megillah, that says, Etz Gavoa 50 Amah. All right, so the story here is that Haman, the evil, goes and builds a gallows, which is a pole, right, or some kind of fixture that he's going to hang Mordechai from, right, and builds it in the center of the city, because his plan is that he's going to kill all the Jews, but Mordechai is going to get special treatment. Mordechai is going to be sort of like a demonstration hanging, right, in the center of the city. There's going to be a 50, and the Megillah tells us he built a wooden gallows that was 50 cubits high. So the Rebbe asks, what? Why is the story so specific about this gallows that's made of wood and it's 50 cubits high? There's something hidden in there. So let's find out. And those are the rungs of the gates of impurity. Sheyesh mem tet panim tameh v'yesh mem tet panim tahor. There's 49 aspects of impurity and 49 aspects of purity. So he's referring to, obviously, to a Kabbalistic cosmology here that tells us that, in a nutshell, by the way, 49 is a significant number. 49 is how many multiples of 7? 7, right? So this is 7 times 7, and 7 is a sacred number. So it's, you can rise on the rungs of purity, of holiness, 49 rungs. Once you exceed that, you're, you could say you're, what would you call a person who has exceeded the 49 rungs?
Enlightened?
It's a tzaddik, yeah. Enlightened, that's a holy one. You go into that place where you've transcended this reality. You become, it's a spiritual ideal, right? This is the destination of your growth work, of your evolution. But a person can also go down 49 rungs, right? Exactly, Shelley. That's exactly it. So you can go down the rungs, but when you come to 49, that's the last rung. And when you go to 50, that's sort of the point of no return. Perhaps, by the way, I just want to say I'm speculating, but let's see where he goes with this. Okay, but you understand the parallelism here. You have the 49 going up and the 49 going down. And, it's said, for instance, that when the teachings, Kabbalist teachings about the whole period of staying in Egypt, right, that the Jews were slaves in Egypt. So being in Egypt was a decline for them. They were going down the rungs, down and down and down. The more they were in Egypt, the more impure they became until they hit the 49, and that's when they were, that's when the Exodus happens. So in all these rungs of impurity, there's the power of Amalek. Amalek is was a people in the desert that are a archetype for evil. So Haman was the descendant of Amalek, of this people. And this is, again, in the, all these stories are metaphors for spiritual principles. So Amalek is the archetype of, the Satan, you could say, or the demon, or the evil, the challenger. Yeah, you want to add something there?
That Amalek represents materiality. He represents not seeing things in it through spiritual eyes.
Right.
It says, the rabbis say about him, he represents coldness, cynicism. But only one nation had the what we would say in technical terms, chutzpah, unmitigated gall, to attack the Jewish people on their way, so that they stood between the Jewish people and the Torah, and that's the nation of Amalek.
This happens in New York. There's an Italian cop, detective, who puts under guys, apropos Purim, in a Hasidic community because there's a murder in the District Diamond. You didn't see this movie? This doesn't ring a bell for anybody. I think it's called A Stranger Amongst Us. And so she disguises herself as a Hasidic woman, but she's really a detective, and she's a Catholic Italian. And what's sweet about the movie is you see the Hasidic life from the inside, because, and there's a Rebbe. There's a moment where she has audience with the Rebbe. This is like in Brooklyn. So it's a good movie. It's a good thriller, sort of like and there's a moment where, the Rebbe is somebody who, he and his community, they survived the Holocaust, and, they settle in Brooklyn, and they're talking about this murder case, and it's developing, and, and she's being successful, and, I mean, obviously everybody's lives, they are transformed. She's learning from their piety, and they're learning from her, there's this sort of like inner faith, and this, this nice kind of bonding between people. And the Rebbe really appreciates her because she's really risking her life to help out there in the community. And there's a scene where they're sitting together, and she asks some questions because the murder is quite horrendous, and it was over diamonds and over diamond districts, over money, and whatever. And there's a moment there where she says to the Rebbe, how can, she says, you're a holy man, how can this be that somebody would do something like this, right? And it's not like she hasn't seen murders. I mean, that's her job, right? She's a detective. And the Rebbe looks at her, it's a kind of wise, pause, right? And says, you and I have something in common. Both of us have seen a lot of evil. I remember I was struck by that. Obviously, he came through the Holocaust, and she's a detective, and they find this kind of, they both, like eye to eye, they understand, And the point of that is that, we go about our happy, lucky life a lot of the time. Most of the time, I mean, we have some tsuris, we have some, things, tsuris means some troubles, but we don't consider that there is a real evil force that rarely shows the fullness of its existence, right? And it's something to contend with. I mean, we're lucky most of us don't have to deal with that most of the time, rarely, if ever. But there are those moments, both in history and maybe in a personal life, where that force, which we call Amalek, right, shows up. And then it kind of like defies logic, because most of us, to get through life, we assume a certain amount of decency. We trust. I trust you. You trust me. There's an assumption that we will be decent to a degree. We'll mess up. We'll hurt each other a little bit. There'll be some friction, but that's not evil, right? But every now and then, you encounter that force, that Amalek force, right, where the basic assumptions of decency and reciprocity and human, kind of connecting, where the rules of the game are completely broken, shattered, and thrown out. Does that sound familiar, by the way? It's, it feels like we live in a political environment that has a bit of that. So back to the Sfat Emet. Boy, I don't think I've been involved with such a thorough analysis of Amalek in a long time. But it's real. It's real. אבל באמת שער ה50 הוא של קדושה. So he tells us, so you have 49 rungs of evil, and the deeper you descend, the harsher it is. But what about the 50th rung? What happens when you get to the 49th rung of impurity, of evil, and then you step forward, the last step to the 50th rung? He says that 50th rung is holiness. You go up the rungs of holiness to the 50th rung, obviously it's holiness. But you go down, the 50th rung is also holiness. Get that? It's deep. Sham ein shnei drachim, רק כולו טוב. At that 50th rung, there is no duality. And when there's no duality, it's all good. Says the Sfat Emet. Ki sham shoresh ha'achdut, because there is the root of unity, of oneness. See, that's back to your question, right? Like, what does it mean to go beyond the tree of good and evil? He's talking about it, right? There's a place of oneness. In a place of oneness, there is no meaning to bad and evil, good and evil, right? But it's null. V'azechtiv b'milchemet Amalek, and on this, about this, it's written in the book of Exodus when they're describing Amalek attacking the Jews, right? Like Rebelli here was describing to us. They're attacking the Jews, right? We read that in the Torah. Kasher yarim Moshe yadav. So there's a verse there that says that Moses, so Amalek is attacking, and Moses, together with Yehoshua bin Nun, his two assistants, Caleb ben Yifune and Yehoshua bin Nun, they go up to the top of a hill, and they're looking over at the battlefield where Amalek is attacking the people. And Moses raises his hands up, it says, to the heavens. And as long as his hands are upraised to the heavens, the Israelites are winning the battle. But when he gets tired and he has to put his hand down, then Amalek starts winning. And they describe this dynamic of Moses, up, Israelites are winning, Moses gets tired, Israelites start losing. So Yehoshua ben Nun, and each he has two assistants, and they hold his hands up, right? So you imagine this picture, right? Moses is on the top of the hill looking at the battlefield, and he has these two younger, assistants, apprentices, and they're holding his hands up until the battle is up. So he's referring here to the verse that describes that, and the verse is Kasher yarim Moshe yadav, when Moses raised his hands. So he says, what does it mean that Moses raised his hands? L'shar ha'chamishim ve'etz ha'chaim shu ha'torah. He raised his hands to the 50th rung, you see, and to the tree of life, which is the Torah. So in the Garden of Eden there were two trees, the trees of good and evil, and there was the tree of life. They're naked, they're happy, weather was always comfortable, the food was always provided, and Garden of Eden, right, by definition. But you have one rule: two trees don't eat the fruit. They eat one. They get the consciousness of good and evil. They go into the duality, and they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Lest now they're going to go and eat from the tree of life. So what's the tree of life? It's the Torah. So Moses is raising his hands to the 50th gate. ולכן שנתעורר כוח משה רבינו עליו השלום שהוא שר התורה, and that's why when Moses' powers were awakened, and Moses is the master of Torah, Moses gives us the Torah, right? So Moses is he is the source of Torah. Yesh mapala Amalek. That's why when he would do that, then Amalek would be losing. Because Torah is all good, Amalek is all bad. He raises his hands, he brings in the force of Torah, force of spiritual teaching, and Amalek starts losing, right? You see this big battle between the light and dark, and all that. L'chen ita shebepurim kiblu haTorah. That's why it says that on Purim we receive the Torah, and this is when the tree of life is being revealed. So there is a midrash that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, but actually it's given a second time. It's completed during Purim. So the giving of the Torah was, thus sealed, thus completed during Purim. V'sham nikra delo yada. And on Purim it says, here's where it gets beautiful. Remember where we started? We started with, you drink until you do not know, till you cannot tell. The term is delo yada. You get yourself into the space where you don't recognize the distinctions of of duality, right? She'en sham shum achiza l'sitra acha klal. Because in that place of not knowing, evil has no foothold. Right? You go through the place of not knowing, evil has no foothold in there. Kihu shorosh achdut. Because that place of not knowing is a place of unity. It's a place of the root of unity, he says. The word for getting drunk, livsume, also means, it comes from the word spices. Besamim, it's spices. You can say like, maybe they didn't get drunk, maybe they were sniffing something, So you see what I'm saying? He says, it doesn't say literally get drunk, it says get intoxicated, right? But it's not telling you how, it's what? Fragrances, right?
Perfume.
Yeah. She says that place that you go when you get intoxicated is a place of fragrance that the whole world was filled with that fragrance when they received the Ten Commandments. That moment of receiving the Ten Commandments, that moment of receiving the Torah, was the moment of the world filling up with the fragrance of oneness, of unity. Umoris keniza lamar remez besamim. Okay, he's going to close it now with another little linguistic, beautiful linguistic play on words that's instructive. That the word besamim is hinted in another verse in Exodus that says Mordekhai. So that is one of the when they're building the temple and they're setting up all the temple worship. So it gives them lists of what kind of plants, what kind of herbs to use for making the kind of incense that they needed to use in the temple. Shemetalgemim marei dechi. So he says, if you look at, if you translate Mordekhai, which by the way in Hebrew means bitter freedom. Dro means freedom, and Mar means bitter, right? So Mordekhai. But when you translate Mordekhai, the Hebrew, into Aramaic, it's translated Marei Dechai. Now, what's Marei Dechai? What does it sound like if you know the Megillah? Mordekhai, because Mordekhai was the leader of the Jews, and in the end of the story, Haman gets hung, and Mordekhai becomes the chief advisor to the. It's a good ending. The story is a good ending.
Yeah.
So it's a happy holiday. Yeah. For those of you who did not know the story, sorry, not to, it does have a good ending. I know this sounded really. It sounded like a terrible story. We got into this like, oh my God, it's like. If you only listened to what we were talking about till now, you probably were getting depressed, and it is depressing, but the story has a good ending, and that's why Purim is such a happy holiday. Mordekhai Arat Moshe Rabbeinu Shoshet Torah. So Mordekhai is the light of Moses, our teacher, who's the root of the Torah. So you see in the story of Purim, Mordekhai is, you could say, the reincarnation. He holds the spirit, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why the story of Purim is the receiving of the Torah again, where Moses gives the Torah at Mount Sinai, but Mordekhai is the one who gives the Torah here in the story of Purim. So if you want to know something about Purim, you got your offer dose right here.
That's one paragraph of Sfat Emet.
That's one paragraph of Sfat Emet.
Talk for a few days about it.
Yeah, so we'll conclude here and to say, what's the take home?
It seems to me that this idea of that it keeps going back to this place. There's almost like a vibration between. I see this 50 and the Torah, the Torah and the tree, all as a sort of portal to another dimension.
And my existential take on this whole thing was, you have the choice to, go through 49 runs down or up, but eventually you become this holiness that's always been there, and that's within all of us.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Clap your hands and stamp your foot. La 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 la. Yeah. Oh, I missed.
And shalom for now. Happy Shushan Purim. Happy Purim. Shalom for now. See you again next Wednesday, 9 to 10, right here at the Shelley Luan Art Gallery.